Welcome to the demonstration for the pen and ink dip pen techniques and textures. To get started, you will need a worksheet. If you do not have a worksheet, you could use a piece of cardstock as well. You will also need some paper towels and a cup of water. For this demonstration, we will be using black India ink and a dip pen. Okay, let's get started. This is our dip pen. The nib on the end can be removed and replaced. The nib must be dipped in ink in order to be used. There is a correct way to hold the pen. You will see that there's a small hole. That hole faces up. When you dip the pen in ink, that hole fills with black ink. To use the pen, you press. As you press, the nib splits, which allows the ink to flow. You can get a variety of line widths. By pressing hard, you will get thick lines. By softly dragging, you'll get a very thin line. Now, before we even start doing any kind of textured techniques, let's start by just experimenting with how the pen works. I'm going to first start by dipping my pen into the ink. I'm going to make sure that the whole side is up on the nib and that that hole is filled. And now I'm going to experiment with different types of lines and drawings just to see how this pen works. Here I am cross-hatching with light pressure. I'm going to try to do a quick sketch of something. I want to be careful not to press too hard so that the ink doesn't all drip out. I also want to be careful to not smudge the ink while it's still wet. Play around with different line widths, different pressures on the pen. And don't forget that eventually I will have to dip my pen back in the ink to refill the ink. Okay, now that we've played with the pen just a little bit, let's go ahead and practice some pen techniques and textures. The first technique we're going to do is called hatching. We are going to apply the pen in a vertical direction going up and down. You can easily shade with pen by adding lines. The closer together the lines, the darker the value. The further apart the lines, the lighter the value. Add more ink as needed. Our second technique that we're going to do is called cross-hatching. Cross-hatching is overlapping lines going in the opposite direction. Your lines can go diagonal, or you can go vertical and horizontal. Again, the more lines you add, the darker the value will be. The less lines you add, the lighter the value will be. Our next technique is pointillism and stippling. Pointillism is dotting with multiple colors, typically done with a paintbrush. And stippling is using one color, like black and white, and typically done using pen and ink. And both techniques are made up of using dots. The more dots you add, the darker the value. The less dots you add, the lighter the value. Our next technique is a fun one. It's called wood grain. You can achieve a wood grain technique by creating an organic shape doodle, which consists of curvy lines that wrap around each other. For a darker value, create them closer together. For a lighter value, create them further apart. Okay, next we're going to try a scribble or curlicue. This technique can be achieved by creating a small circular motion with your pen. For a darker value, make tight small circles that overlap each other. For a lighter value, make them larger and spread them out. You can also play with line width. By applying pressure to the pen, you'll get a thicker line, and less pressure, you'll get a thinner line. And our final technique is called scumbling. Scumbling is very similar to scribbling and curly, but instead of going in a circular motion, we're going to go more of an angular motion with our scribbles. And our last and final step is to make sure that we clean and dry our pen. I'm first going to dip my pen into water and get all the extra ink off. Next, I'm going to take that paper towel and go ahead and dry off my nib so that the nib doesn't rust. And that concludes our lesson on dip pens. Thank you for watching and happy creating.